Good evening, everybody. My name is Rich. I'm alcoholic. And you're never supposed to do that, buddy, when somebody gets the microphone after you. But I don't do that. Thank you all for inviting me to the party. My sponsor always reminds me that you guys could stay sober without me, but I can't stay sober without you. And I need to be here far more than you all need me here. And everybody that's put so much into this and warm welcomed me, and the little basket of stuff in the room, so I had some snacks, and just a whole bunch of people did a little bit to make a big thing great, and that's kind of how AA works. We just do our little part to pull off something wonderful, and I've sure enjoyed meeting your family and the wife and the kids and the grandkids. It's been awesome. So thank you very much. And with that said, my name is Rich. I'm alcoholic. And I was separated from alcohol on August the 30th of 2004. If you're new, I say it that way very intentionally, so you know that I didn't quit drinking. I didn't put the plug in the jug. My best thinking didn't bring me to AA. None of that crap I sometimes hear in a meeting is true. If that was true, it would make me non-alcoholic, right? It would imply that I have power, choice, and control. I quit drinking. I put the plug in. I just came to AA. I, right? None of that was true. On August the 29th of that year, I was as drunk as I've ever been, and on August the 30th, I didn't have to take a drink all day. Y'all don't have a step for that. There's no sentence in the book for it. There's no chapter. And that's the great miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. And if that's happened for anyone in this room, and you're sitting around here waiting for your miracle, it already happened. And what's going to happen here, what y'all did for me, was you taught me how to accept it, to protect it, and to respect it. And we do that by and through those 12 steps and the 12 traditions we just heard read. And I grew up in, well, I guess I ought to tell you, I'm a member of the Primary Purpose Group. We're a big book study that meets on Thursday nights in Ocean City, Maryland. If anybody's traveling, we only have one meeting in Ocean City on Thursday nights, so look us up. We'd love to have you. I have a sponsor. His name's Roger. He actually likes me to tell you that his name's Roger McMahon because he's getting up in age. He's got a pacemaker and a defibrillator. He's the only one of those in the Ocean City area. He's in the phone book. He likes to die on me about once a year. He collapses, literally he dies, and the pacemaker kicks in and brings him back, and then we're in the hospital together for about 2 weeks, and while they get his enzymes balanced out, and I sit next to the bed, and I read him his favorite chapter, We Agnostics, and he gets all dramatic and lays there while I read. But anyways, people from all over the country that have come to visit look him up and knock on the door and say, I heard that bald idiot you sponsor in Mississippi or California or Utah, and it is the bright spot of his day when one of you stop by to say hi to an old AA guy. He just loves it, and he saved my life. So put a smile on his face if you would, please. I grew up in Baltimore. I have a mother and father that are just dynamite, man, just lovely people, ton of love. Nobody drinks in my family. I have one little sister. She's 3 years younger than me. I don't have any aunts or uncles that drink, no grandparents that drink. So if you're, new, counting days, months, so those folks that were doing that, number one, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. This is the most amazing organization I never wanted to be a part of. And I welcome you. I mean, nobody's shooting for Alcoholics Anonymous. I know that. But it turns out to be, and I belong to some pretty heady things today, and this is hands down the best. And if you're counting days, trying to figure this thing out and how you got alcoholism and what am I doing here? And nobody in your family. I like saying that because sometimes I hear person after person, I'm third generation alcoholic, my dad drank, my mom drank, all that's awesome. Here's an example of somebody that none of that is true, right? I come from a wonderful family and nobody drinks. And I asked my sponsor how he thinks, I became alcoholic, and he said, I think it's from drinking too much alcohol, but if you need something deeper, go for it. I remember having an amazing life up to about third grade. I went to a public school. I had a bunch of friends. And then in third grade, my parents did something that I was going to hate them for the next 20 years. They took me out of that public school and sent me to a private school. And they did that with the benefit of these steps. I mean, you guys could probably figure out why they did that. It took me 20 years and a sponsor and a lot of step work. They did that so that I'd have a better chance at life than they had, a better education than they were ever gifted, a better opportunity. I didn't see it that way. I saw that. Who does that to a kid? Who takes you out of a school where you got all these friends, puts you on a school bus with a bunch of rich kids? I had to ride that thing 45 minutes each way to and from school. These kids made fun of me because we were from a little horse farm. I had chores in the morning. I had to, feed them and sweet feed, and they called me farm boy and redneck, and their names were on the buildings in downtown Baltimore. Price Waterhouse. I literally went to school with Jonas Price, right? And these, I could go on, but that's these kids, and I'm there. I've always gotten to go to school for academics and for sports, right? And that served me well. It was confusing, but served me well. I hated that school also. There was a kid on that long school bus. His name was Reed. I hated Reed. I think the school assigned him to me, but I couldn't swear to it. I don't know if they do that in Georgia. They assign you an older kid whose job it is to beat you up every day for no reason. And that was Reed. He would just beat me up every single day. And there was a woman on the school bus, a girl. Her name was Nikki, and Nikki was something else. And I didn't know how to talk to Nikki or sit next to Nikki or anything with Nikki or any other woman for that matter. I got nothing. And I'm just like a nervous little 12, 13-year-old twit trying to get through puberty. And there's another unwritten rule in Maryland where the older kids sit in the back of the school bus and the younger kids towards the front. It's like a social hierarchy. You're nodding, so maybe they do that in Georgia. And if you go to the back of the bus, you automatically get beat up. And that would happen a lot. And one day, I think I was in 6th or 7th grade, and again, I didn't know I was going to be in Alcoholics Anonymous, or I would have taken better notes, right? Some of the older kids said, you want to skip last class and do some drinking. I'd never skipped any class. I'd never done any drinking. And out of my mouth came, you bet, right? I've been doing it all along because I'm excited to be hanging out with the older kids and do whatever they're doing. And they start passing around this, liquor. And I would love to. They said, what do you drink? And I said, bourbon. I don't know where I got that from. I just made something up, and I'd never had anything, nonetheless, bourbon. But I wish it was true, because that's kind of cool, right? My first drink was bourbon, and I think of Georgia's kind of a bourbon-y kind of place, But what those guys actually had was peach schnapps, right? And I'll tell you, that happens to me everywhere I tell the story. People just laugh at you when your first drink's peach schnapps, because right away I'm a weenie. And it's like, could anything be wimpier than peach schnapps? But I now know that it's not what I drink, how often I drink it. It's not what it does to me that makes me be here with you, right? It's what it does for me that makes me one of you. See, alcohol does to a non-alcoholic the same thing it does, right? Everybody, to a human being. You put enough alcohol in a non-alcoholic, they're going to get sick. It's called alcohol poison, right? Alcohol is a depressant, and it's a poison. The human body will get rid of it if you put enough of it in anyone. You do that to the Pope, and that'll happen, right? You put enough alcohol in a non-alcoholic and put them behind the wheel of a car enough times, they're going to get a DUI, or 2 or 3 DUIs. Doesn't make you alcoholic. That's just what happens when you drink and drive a car enough times. Those are the odds. You put enough alcohol in a non-alcoholic for a long enough period of time and stop abruptly, they're going to shake and twitch and sweat and go through those early DTs that we did. Doesn't make you alcoholic. That's what happens when you put alcohol in the human body. But what it does for me, that's what makes me one of you. And man, what I'm willing to let this stuff do to me in exchange for what it does for me. And as these guys are passing around that peach schnapps, man, and I'm knocking it back with the fellas for the first time in my life, I realized I'm standing shoulder to shoulder with these boys, man, and they're as lucky to be hanging out with me as I am with them, and I'd never felt like that, right? And the next thing that happens to me is I'm going to get on that school bus, and I'm going to sit next to Nikki. And I don't even know where that came from. I mean, after drinking a bunch of this stuff, I intuitively knew how to handle this situation with Nikki that used to baffle me, right? And I get on that school bus, and I'm walking back to sit next to Nikki, and Reed gets up out of his seat to give me my daily beating. And as he gets to his feet, in his defense, he wasn't all the way to his feet, but he's getting up out of that bus seat, and I give him everything I got, man, and Reed goes down and out. I knocked him out cold. It was the hardest I've ever hit anybody. And he was out cold. And I sit down next to Nikki, and I'm looking at Nikki. And Nikki's looking at me, and I'm looking at Nikki, and she's looking at me. And, man, then the whole school bus is, like, silent, right? There's, like, this long overdue silence, right? It's like, finally you know who I am. I mean, I've been waiting for this moment my whole life, right? And we get to Nikki's bus stop, and she leans over, and Nikki gives me this little kiss that's like half on the lips and half on the cheek. I mean, it is different than when my mother and my aunts ever had kissed me. I mean, I felt this bad boy in my toes. It was magic, right? And I get off at my bus stop, and we get there, and I go inside, and I'm obviously drunk into this wonderful family with morality, integrity, rules, whole lot of love, and I'm in big, big trouble. And they leave me in the bathroom to be sick all night, and I was grounded forever, and I was sick as a dog. And they left me in there to be sick. Y'all know why they left me in there, right? Because they were going to teach me a lesson. That was going to become a common theme in my life. With a whole bunch of well-meaning people were going to try to teach me a lesson. And the problem is that that doesn't ever really stick with an alcoholic of my variety. You know, there's just no punishment too great. There's no consequence big enough. There's no threat. You can never scare an alcoholic sober. But anyways, nobody knew that when I'm, 13, 14, 15, and they're just doing this. And I woke up. I don't ever remember being that sick. I now know as a hangover. I didn't even know that word back then. And I'm sick as a dog, and I was grounded forever. I don't know if you remember that. That's a big deal. I saw some of your, I know we got some prison people. Grounded forever is like life without parole, because you don't know when the end date is. I mean, you can serve any piece of time as long as you know your release date. But I didn't know, this was, and there I am, I'm sick as a dog, and I'm grounded forever. And that thought came, are you ever going to do any more of that drinking? Just like, are you kidding me? Sick as a dog and grounded forever. What a small price to pay for what I had going on that school bus, man, with Reed and Nikki. And what I didn't know is that experience, man, that single experience launched my relationship with alcohol. I can't say it any better than Bill does. The thing was like a boomerang, man, that did so much for me for so long. And while that boomerang was going out, baby, there was nothing like it. I am not here because I don't like alcohol, man. Right? I don't even relate to people that are like, oh, I took a drink and it was awful from the beginning. No, this stuff was, man, what it did for me, right? And then one day that thing was going to turn in flight and come back and nearly shred me to ribbons. And it was going to take from me every bit of integrity, every bit of morality, every decent value that those good parents instilled in me. And you know what the tricky thing about alcohol was? It was going to do it so slow that I didn't know it was happening. It was going to do it one drink at a time. One little bit at a time. And our book says that by the time that the alcoholic, that's me, clues into what's happened, that I've slipped past this point of human aid. And it also goes on to say that by the time I figure it out, I'm often the last to know, right? And I'm all nervous, right, when I come into AA to say those words. It's like the scariest sentence of my life, right? Like, my name's Rich, I'm an alcoholic. And the truth is if the meeting was really like everyone in my family and anyone that had ever known me through high school and college, right? I would have finally said that. My name's Rich, I'm an alcoholic. And 200 people would have gone, no shit, right? Because I'm the last one, right, to figure it out. And yet I think I'm pronouncing this big thing, right? And I do really well through school because I remember things. My sponsor points out that that's very different than being intelligent. But in the United States, if you read a book and remember it, which I do, I can tell you what page things are on from reading a book one time. I never have to look at it again. I can go, that's page 17, halfway down, right? I'm awesome to have in your home group. I'm the guy that you really, I'm teasing, I'm annoying. Nobody likes that guy, right? Oh, you're trying to talk about page 23. That's the third paragraph, right? I get a scholarship to college for a combination of academics and soccer. I picked the university. I had a lot of those from some really good schools. I went to a really good school. I chose the University of San Diego. I chose it for a couple of reasons. It was 3,000 miles. It was as far as I could possibly go from my parents, their rules, their integrity, their values. My father taught me how to surf before I can remember. I don't be like me asking you, tell me your experience learning to walk. Right, like you don't really remember that. It's just like, I don't know, I've just been walking since, right? And that's how surfing has been in my life. It's still the great joy of my life. I surf over 300 days a year right now. I love it. And what a great gift my father gave me with that. We'll talk more about that. But so I go out there to surf more. The women are beautiful. It's 3,000 miles away. I mean, this is my college decision-making process, right? Beautiful women, surfing, far, far away from good parents. It turns out that the University of San Diego is a Jesuit college. I didn't know what Jesuits were. I should have looked into that. There was a whole lot of things I should have looked into, but I'm out there. And I get assigned an academic advisor. It's a lady. Her job's to help me pick classes that maybe you graduate in 4 years like you're supposed to. That seems pretty innocuous, right? Like, pretty simple. I don't see it that way. Anybody that's ever been put in my life to try to give me a little friendly nudge down the road of life, just a little helpful guidance, I don't see it that way. I think you're trying to hold me down. You're trying to tell me what to do. Back off. This is my life. You let me live it, right? You stay on your side, right? And I don't know what that's all about, man, but there's been a lot of those people that just wanted to help me, and I just want you to back off. Right? And our book talks about that defiance, right, is like the number one characteristic of the and that sure fits me. She pointed out that I was going to need some other things on my resume other than like soccer and good grades. She's like, there's not much of a career for soccer, in case you haven't noticed. And she said, you need to get involved in some stuff that, I think she used the word that I'd never heard before, altruistic, right? That like all right. But what I heard, right, is makes you look good on paper. I don't know about you. I like looking good on a resume. I don't like being good or doing good, but I like you to think that, right? And she said, we've had an idea here at the University of San Diego for a long time. We want to have a student-run Office of Alcohol and Drug Education. That's a place where students that are, struggling with alcohol and drugs can come get counseled by another student. We would like to send you to get accredited as an alcohol and drug counselor. You could probably get through this stuff in about 6 months because you remember everything so fast. And we would like you to be the founding father of the Office of Alcohol and Drug Education. This is going to look good on your resume. And I'm like, I'm your guy. And I did that. Now, there's some other things happening in my life. I don't know if anybody played a Division I sport, but you have 2-a-day practices. They're very strict about that when they're paying $40,000 a year for you to go to school. And I got morning practice. I got evening practice. I got Jesuit classes in the middle. I've got 4 other guys on the soccer team that are on scholarship. They're from Tijuana, Mexico, which is 29 miles south of the university. Amazing soccer players, great guys, and each one of these Mexican fellows has about 36 cousins apiece that live just beneath the border. And it turns out that a lot of the kids that go to this school got good money and they like smoking this green stuff, right, from Mexico. And these guys' cousins know how to get that. And I don't know about you, but you could drop me out of an airplane into any environment and I'll figure it out in about a minute, right? If you drop me into the middle of a Grateful Dead concert, I'm wearing patchouli, I'm in tie-dye, man, and we're noodling, right? You drop me into the middle, right, of a heavy metal concert, we're doing that. You drop me into a sporting area, we'll play whatever sport's going on, right? We just figure it out real quick. And in San Diego, the deal was the guys with the stuff got the chicks. It wasn't real hard to figure out. And I also knew this other thing that nobody told me, and that's that any woman like you weren't going to want to go out with a guy like me unless it was first class. I was going to need a nice car. It was going to be nice restaurants. There's going to have to be flowers. I mean, and no woman ever told me, like, you're ugly, you're stupid, nothing. I just knew that I wasn't good enough. And if I was going to go out with you, it was going to have to be spectacular. And you don't know when you're 18 that you're launching on this course. I mean, I was just like Bill. Remember that sentence where Bill's working on the farm and he said, I would do the last honest day's labor? I would ever do, right? The exciting lure and maelstrom of Wall Street were on, right? What that mean? He liked the hustle and bustle, the gamble, man, the shucking and jiving for a quick buck on Wall Street. I didn't know I was making that exact same decision, right? I didn't like wake up at 18 and go, you know what, I'm pretty much done with the spiritual. I think I'm going to pursue the material. Yourself? What are you doing today? Right? But it just seemed like, so now I've got, my life's getting complicated. I got morning practice. I got evening practice. I got Jesuit classes. I got all this green stuff getting shipped in from Mexico. We're bringing it across the border. I'm shrink wrapping it. I'm sending it across the country so that you guys make sure you have some here. And it's going all over the place. And I got one of those tiger won't eat with a tiger can't smell shrink wrappers that suck the air out, right? So that I don't need to tell you all how to mail it. And that's going on, and I'm drinking more and more and more, and my drinking's escalating. You know, and it also says in our book, by the time I got to read, that often the alcoholic lives a double life. And I can tell you that at this point in my life, if I'd have only had 2 lives going, that would have been good. But if any 2 people that knew me or cared about me in my life were in the same room at the same time, there was going to be trouble. The gig was going to be up, right? If my sister talked to my parents, trouble, because I had different stories going. If my coach talked to the registrar's office about which classes I was actually in versus who was just giving me grade, trouble. If my parents talked to the registrar's office, trouble. If my girlfriend talked to my other girlfriend, big trouble. You know, and it takes a lot of effort, right, and a lot of drinking to keep that going. And I would have told you I'm just really busy. I got a lot going on. I'm very stressful. If your life was like my life, you'd have to drink like I do, right? And what you guys have taught me is that a clear conscience makes for a soft pillow. And if I'm having trouble sleeping, there's a reason, right? It's one of God's greatest gifts to me is not sleeping. It tells me there's more to be done. There's a step to do, right? And, you know, that was one of my questions when I was new. Purple shirts. I always wanted to know, when I got here, I was like, so what's like the AA over-the-counter approved sleeping pill? Because when I had like 60 days, I'm shaking, I'm sweating through pillows, like through the pillow. I mean, I'm going to Walmart to get another pillow. It was not salvageable, right? I mean, I'm a mess, and I just wanted one night's sleep. And inside, I knew that if I just had somewhere between 3 or 5 good ones, that I could get a good night's sleep. But I also knew that I couldn't take so much as one. I mean, what do y'all take? And you know what the old timers say? We take the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? A clear conscience makes for a soft pillow. There's a bunch of work ahead, son, right? I'm just like, oh, man. But it turns out that that's the truth, right? You know, if you want to throw the towel in, you know, I knew what a good night's sleep could be. But I mean, at that point, there was just so much going on. By my senior year, I'd switched from the green stuff to the white stuff. I bought my first home in La Jolla, California. It's one of the most beautiful counties in the world. I was living in front of one of the best surf spots in the world. It's called Wind and Sea Beach. I was 423 Nautilus Street. It's the 3rd house on the right at Wind and Sea Beach. Bought the house cash, none of it legal. I'm driving a silver BMW convertible that's got a number on the back that lets you know that it's one of the models you can't buy at a dealership in the United States. It's European. I had to have it shipped here on a boat because I'm that important. I'm dating the prettiest girl at the college. At least that's what you all thought. So I dated her. I have no idea if I liked her to this day. And it's about 4:30 in the morning, and boom, 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 every single door and window in that house bust in. I'm on my stomach, and I'm getting some plastic zip ties put on. And they're taking me off to the Metropolitan Correction Center, which is the federal penitentiary in downtown San Diego. I've done a lot of jail time up to that point. All through high school, I specialize. In Maryland, I guess I don't know how Georgia works. In Maryland, jail sentences are anything up to 18 months. When you get longer than 18 months, you go to prison. I was never a prison guy. That just represented a much longer term commitment than I was willing to make. But I absolutely specialize in like the 30-day sentence, a weekend, violate probation, get the 60-day backup time, get out, screw it up again, 60 days, 90 days. My sponsor pointed out the same thing as John's. He's like, you do realize you were serving a life sentence. You're just too stupid to realize you're doing it on the installment program. And because meanwhile, I thought I was winning. Right, I would say things to you at the bar, I'd be like, yeah, I beat the distribution, pled out to a simple possession, only got 6 months. I beat it, right? And then I violate probation, get sent back, right? But in my mind, I'm winning, right? Like, and yet when I get to AA, I'm like offended by the second step that you're kind of inferring that my thinking might be a little off, right? Like, you might be crazy, but not me, I'm sitting in that place. I now know, and I'm going to use the word God because I don't have a lot of time to tell you what you guys have given me in 1 hour. Believe it or not, it's wholly insufficient to encapsulate the life that you've given me in 1 hour. So I'm going to use the word God. And whatever popped in your head when I just said that, that's what I'm talking about. I hope that word brings us together and doesn't divide the room. I know when I was new that used to kind of bother me. And in fact, you guys made the mistake of calling on me one time. It was like a 3rd step meeting, 11th step, I forget what step. But what I thought the topic was, with like 30 days sober, was that you deeply wanted to hear what I thought about God, right? And we're going to go around the room and like hear Rich's take on God. And don't ever call on a newcomer in a 3rd step meeting, right? Because whatever we think about God, it's so far off that we're here, right? So it's obviously screwy. But they call on me, and I launch into my thing, and I'm like, I hate the word God. I bristle with the integrity. I like where it says that because I've read the book and I can like spit things back. I'm like, but I am a surfer, and here's what I'm willing to cop to. Every morning when I go out there, what waves are is energy that travel thousands of miles across the ocean in a very specific direction. And a wave breaks when it hits exactly half the depth of the size of the wave. So an 8-foot wave will break when the bottom of that wave hits 4 feet of water, which is kind of like a train or a car crash. It causes the bottom to stop and the top to throw over. And that's what makes that wave break. But that alone, that wave has to hit the sandbar or coral reef at a very specific angle to make it peel down the line so that you actually have somewhere to surf rather than the wave just crashing over all at once. And once that wave travels thousands of miles across the ocean at precisely the right angle and hits half the depth of the size of the wave, that alone will not make the wave break. The wind has to be coming from the land to the sea. That's called an offshore wind. And that offshore wind holds up the top of the wave, makes that wave hollow, and creates those beautiful tubes that you see us inside surfing the wave. And I'm willing to concede that I can't make all of that happen at the same time so that I could get a good day surfing, right? And one of these old timers grabs me up after the meeting in the hallway and goes, "Hey kid, right? Check it out. We've got this word around here in AA that we use. It's got 3 letters. It's really fast to say. God. See, you just used up about 30 minutes of our precious hour talking about the thing that makes the waves and the wind and and we know exactly what you're talking about, and we're with you. And if you just use the word God, it'll keep it brief, and we'll know exactly what you're talking about." And I'm like, okay. And so I've just said God ever since. So whatever that means to you, man, I hope it brings us together. And whatever you believe in, I do too. I'm with you. So, with that said, what I know that God did for me was put me inside that penitentiary with about 1,600 men. I do know that about 1,599 of them were innocent. And I know that because they told me that every day, right? At the ER, we'd be working out, and they told me stories like I'd been telling my whole life. And those stories sound like this. Well, the reason I'm in here is because of my mechanic. And if my mechanic had fixed my taillight correctly, that cop would have never pulled me over. And if that cop hadn't pulled me over, he wouldn't have smelled the alcohol on my breath and asked me to step from the vehicle. That led to field sobriety tests. Then they found the dope in the trunk. And if I get out of here and ever find that mechanic, we're going to get this straightened out. And you know what? If you hook that guy up to a lie detector test, he believes he's sitting in federal prison because of his mechanic. Absolutely believes that. And that's how I was my entire life. I could give you example after. It was never my fault. And for the first time in my life, I was where I was. I was the only guy in there that was guilty, and I knew I was right where I belonged. And I knew that I was where I was because of who I was. And I was who I was because of how I live. And I'm going to repeat that because it's the greatest awakening that I've ever had. I was where I was because of who I was, and I was who I was because of how I live. And that means my tombstone is not going to say, here lies Rich Bruckner, he meant well. Because I always meant well, right? And you guys are big on that in AA. You don't care much about what I think or what I intend to do or my opinion, right? Any of that. You care about what I do. It's a program of action, not about thinking or any of that. I don't even have to like it. I just got to do it. And, maybe it's a Friday night. You guys remember getting ready to go out on Friday night? It's like 9 o'clock. I called it the pre-game shower. You got about 3 of them in you already. You're in that hot shower. You got a cold one in the shower with you, man. The steam is hitting you. God, and it's coming beating down that thing. I mean, it is such a moment of optimistic joy. I mean, it's going to be, and I get out of the shower and I put on a silk shirt and I'm going up to LA to the Whiskey A Go-Go and I spray on a little of that girl sauce in case I run into you. And, it's just going to be a great night. And, and then Frank calls and says, what are you up to, Rich? And I go, well, Frank, tonight's the night that I'm going to shame my mom to where she can't look her only son in the eye for about a decade. What are your plans tonight? Stacy calls and goes, where are you headed tonight, Rich? Well, Stace, tonight's the night that I'm going to embarrass my little sister to where she doesn't speak to me for 6.5 years. What are you doing tonight? See, I never meant for that to happen, but both of those are true things. That's what happened. Didn't intend for any of it. Usually, we don't intend for it. We're not, generally, most of the alcoholics I know, we're not bad-spirited. We don't have ill will. We don't mean for that stuff to happen. It just does. And I'm in that place for about 9.5 months, and it turns out I'm waiting for trial. I'm not given any bond whatsoever. I always remember the U.S. This was another one that got me. Those ones you can't postpone or evade. The book says when you're just hit with truth. U.S. attorney stood up and said, if Mr. Bruckner's given any bond whatsoever, he'll flee to Mexico and live a happy and successful life with his business partners. And that struck me because it wasn't right. I hadn't had a happy and successful life in Baltimore. I hadn't had a happy and successful life in Ocean City. Hadn't had a happy and successful life in La Jolla. And I sure wasn't going to have a happy and successful life, in Mexico with a bunch of guys looking to kill me. After the 9.5 months, it turns out the lawyers figured out that the DEA agents had lied on an affidavit to get the search warrant that gave them permission to come into the house, and it was determined to be an illegal search, and they weren't allowed to use any of the evidence that they found at the trial. They had to dismiss the trial, and I walked out. I'd love to tell you I walked out a free man, but if you're an alcoholic like I am, you've ever been in a penitentiary, you know what you are the day you get out. You're thirsty. And at this point, I'm drinking to just bury the life that almost was. I was almost a college graduate. I was almost a decent son. My mom's a retired first grade teacher. I don't know, we got any elementary school teachers? All right, let me tell you about elementary school teachers. They laminate everything, okay? If you sit it on the table, they laminate it, right? And the San Diego Union Tribune and the Los Angeles Times, when I got arrested, they ran a story that said Jesuit student, 27 kilos of cocaine. My mom was kind enough to save a copy and laminate it. Proud mom moment, right? And my mom could tell you precisely how many kids in the thousands that she taught to read in her 36 years as a first grade teacher. That's the life, that's her legacy. Teaching kids to read, making kids better, giving them opportunity, a life, packing things into the stream of life. And here's what her son's doing. And I couldn't come home for a lot of reasons, and I couldn't stay where I was for a lot of reasons. Anybody that loved or cared about me was long since done with me because my alcoholism is like that. See, when I drink, I'm a user and I'm a taker. And the more you love me, God bless you, I will suck you dry. I will take every last penny. You got a little teacher 401k, cash it in. I need one more bond. I need one more lawyer. I need this. I want. I'm going to be there for Christmas. I'm gonna. Every sentence I say. I mean, I'm such a user and taker and loser that I force the people that love me the most to just be done with me for self-preservation. And then I get to Alcoholics Anonymous and say the biggest lie, selfish thing in alcohol. Oh, I was only hurting myself, right? Yeah, I was only hurting myself and anyone that cared about me. And I start bouncing around the country. I was like a man without a country. I couldn't stay where I was. I couldn't come back east. And I'm moving. I'm driven by my alcoholism. It tells me when I'm waking up. Sorry to be gross. It tells me upon awakening which end of the toilet I'm addressing, what I need to drink, how fast I need to get it in, what my day is going to look like, what I'm going to need to do to get more, right? There is no choice. And I'm bouncing around. I moved to a town called Steamboat, Colorado. When I drink somewhere, I get warrants. I joke and call myself a warrant drinker. When there's warrants, I run away because tough guys face the music, right? They walk in broad-shouldered, and I got myself in, I'll get myself out. When I hear about warrants, I run away to another state. That's what cowards do. I go from Steamboat over to a town called Ketchum, Idaho. Some people call it Sun Valley, Idaho. I'm there. I work a little job until I get in trouble. I go from there over to, once the warrants pop up there, I go over to Jackson, Wyoming. I'm delusional, by the way. I'm sitting. My favorite bar in Jackson was the $1 Million Cowboy Bar. I don't know if anybody. All right. So we got one. Let me tell you about the $1 Million Cowboy Bar. The bar stools are actual saddles bolted to metal poles, right? So when you get to this bar, I mean, you just get in that saddle, man, and you're like, there is a feeling of. I mean, you're in for the night. I mean, it's my kind of place, right? Like, there's commitment, there's stability. I'm in, and I'm buying, you know, the woman next to me, you know, some drinks with some money that's certainly not legally earned, and she's like, you know, looking into my eyes, all dizzy-eyed, and she's like, "What's your story, cowboy?" And I'm like, "I'm traveling, babe, just traveling." You know, like I'm a romantic sojourner across our great nation, right? Like on the Great American Road Trip or something. I mean, I'm like one step ahead of a warrant, right? And I wind up eventually where all big shot wannabe, you know, drug dealers wind up when the federal government seizes every property you own, every car, every bank account, and alcoholism owns you lock, stock, and barrel. I wind up back on my mom's couch in Ocean City, Maryland. And it turns out that I mean, I couldn't even believe this woman took me back in one more time, right? Couldn't even believe it. And I was never, ever, ever going to drink again. I was so grateful. And there's only one rule at Mom's house, right? You come back, you can come live here as long as, oh, we got a lot of Mom's couches. And y'all just rat it yourselves right out. No shame here. And that's the deal, man. You can stay here as long as you want, as long as you don't drink. And I meant it. I meant it, man. And I made it 2.5 weeks before I drank again. I'm coming in and out of AA, and I hate AA, and I don't care for it. It's just not my cup of tea. You're talking about God and steps and writing things down and inventory. My line of work, that's called a paper trail. You don't write anything down. I've got warrants. At this point, I had warrants in 3 states, Colorado, California, and one in Maryland. The IRS is looking for me, and you guys are suggesting I write things down. No, thank you. I just got out of the federal penitentiary. I'm not going back. There's a woman named Janine in AA that as she popped up at like every meeting. She always had that blue book they gave to that beautiful young lady, man, with 2 days, right on, and welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. And Janine always had that. Janine always had that book that you got, man. And she was 16 years sober when I met her, and she's always carrying that stupid book with her. And I'm thinking to myself, because I read a book once in about a half an hour, and I remember it the rest of my life. And she's 16 years sober, carrying this in every meeting. I'm like, what's wrong with you? Are you slow? Like, do you not? Why do you always have that? Right? And I can't wrap my mind around it. And she's got these little girls that are always with her, carrying their books. And right in back of her, she doesn't call them sponsees. She doesn't call them pigeons like they did in the old days. She calls them duckies, right? Which like makes me want to punch her. And I mean, seriously, it's awful. And she comes into the meeting, Janine would come in, and she's got that smile that a lot of you have, and she sits down and like, the duckies like filing in back of her with their little books. And at the meetings, they do this thing in Maryland where they give out chips for like 30 days, 60 days. You guys, okay, you know what I'm talking about. And you get like 10 seconds at our meetings to say, hey, you got 30 days, right? And it'd be like, and I sit in the back where you're supposed to sit when you're new and you're pissed and you don't want to be here and you don't want to be sober. And, I got my hat down. It was before I didn't even know to take off a hat in a church, right? Like I'm in the back, I got the hat down, I'm doing the tough guy thing and hating. And they go, does anybody have 30 days? And little Rebecca would come skipping up to the front, and she's like, my name's Rebecca. Janine's my sponsor. I just finished my 4th and 5th step. I'm getting free. And I'm in the back, and I'm thinking, I'm going to knock her teeth so far down her throat that girl will never smile like that. And then, does anybody have 60 days, right? And she comes skipping up, right? And she's like, my name's Teresa. I have 60 days. I just started my amends. I'm getting free. Janine's my sponsor. Right? And same thing. I'm just going to knock her. And then the longest walk in AA, right, for any of us. Does anybody have 24 hours or a desire to start again? And I do the longest walk in AA one more time, right? And, and that's who Lee asked. So if anybody's, let's get the absolute AA loser to come to Albany, Georgia, right? Because that's what you're looking at, man. And I do a residential burglary on my mom under the lash of alcoholism. Bill talks about when the morning terror and madness were on, I would steal from my wife's slender purse. My mom had a restraining order on me at this point. I'm not allowed 100 yards from her, the house. She sleeps with a deadbolted door, a restraining order, and her little purse under the bed. That should tell you all you need to know about our previous relationship. And it's about 3 in the morning. I need more. We call that the phenomenon of craving, right? And the things I do behind that phenomenon of craving are the bulk of my 9th step, right? It's what I do when I need more. And God help you if you're between me and more. It's nothing personal. You're in the wrong place. It's got nothing to do with love. I need more. And I break into her house because that's who tough guys rob is mom. I'm not, Robin, you might hurt me. And I sponsor some guys that the real tough guys rob grandma. I got a couple of those I sponsor. I'm like, right on, gangster. You're in there robbing grandma. You are badass, right? But we got a lot of grandma robbers. They pawn grandma's jewelry. I'm a tough guy. And so there it is. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm doing a commando crawl across my mom's bedroom floor. I'm on my stomach, being stealth. And I'm reaching under the bed for her purse, and my mom wakes up, and her eyes come off the side of the bed, and she's looking down at me on the floor on my stomach. And she says, take it, Rich. Just take it, would you? And that was a tough one to get around. I'd love to tell you I didn't take it, but I did. And I stayed as long as I could on that run until I got picked up and into jail and out. And I eventually make it back to Alcoholics Anonymous because I'd been coming. I knew it just wasn't for me, but I ran out of choices. And it turns out this is a great program of action for people that are out of programs of action. I'm not going to try to convince you of anything, because if you still got an idea how you got another run in it, trust me, I know you're going to do it. But when you're good and out of ideas, this is a great program of action for people that are out of programs of action, right? And I start coming to the meetings, and I get to 36 days without a drink. At 36 days without a drink, I'm ready to kill myself. I got no sponsor. I got no steps. I got none of that. I am not drinking, right? I don't know if anybody's ever done any not drinking and not changing, but it is a very dangerous place for an alcoholic of my variety to be. That's where most of us kill ourselves. I believe the last statistic I saw is that 93% of alcoholic suicides are committed sober. When I am not drinking, that's when I become aware of the fact that my mother can't look at me, that I have a sister that won't speak to me, that I almost had a degree from a wonderful school, that I could have done anything I wanted to, but now I'm unemployable. I have 36 arrests. Anybody that pulls my NCIC is going to see 36, that was a lie. I have 36 convictions. I have a lot more arrests. You'll see 36 guilties on there. None of them would impress you, by the way. I want to say that. You wouldn't look at it and go, there's a badass. You would look at it and go, there's an idiot. It should just say, drunk and stupid right at the top. Like none of it you would go, ooh, right? It's all like drunk in public, peeing in public. We have the, failure to obey the lawful command of a police officer is a charge in Maryland, where a police officer says like, sir, you're at the fraternity, but you're being loud. Could you go back in the fraternity house? And that's all I had to do, but I don't have the ability. It's like, I just can't listen to people, right? When you put, could you go inside? And I go, no, right? And off I go one more time, right? And that's what it's all made up of, but it turns out that all of that matters, My federal sentencing guidelines, when I stood in front of that judge because of those in that federal case, because of all those priors. I don't know if anybody's done any federal stuff, but it's a chart, man. The judge doesn't even get to make up his mind. They look at the number of priors and what you had with you. They got 36 and 27 killers. They go like that. And he was supposed to sentence me to 46 to 60 years. And I'm going, man, that's kind of severe. I'm not a prison guy, right? And that scared the daylights out of me. And now I'm coming to 36 days sober. I'm 29, cusping 30. I have to have my liver biopsied. My liver is showing fatty spots. I'm physically deteriorating. Pre-cirrhotic liver. I don't know if anybody's had the biopsy, right, where they put that tube in, they pull the thing. It hurts. It was awful. And they tell me what to do. You got to eat like this. You cannot. They told me Tylenol is the worst possible thing for your liver. If you take Tylenol, it's going to shut your liver down. You're dead meat. No Tylenol. At 36 days, I couldn't live one more day without a drink, and I knew I couldn't take another drink. And I took as many Tylenol as I could get a hold of and everything else in the medicine cabinet. My body collapses, I'm told by the lady that lives next door. When I fell down, I fell into a refrigerator. It slams against the wall. Scares her. I now know that lady had a perfect attendance record at work. That was her first day she missed work in 9 years. It's a Tuesday. And she heard that. She dialed 911. They came. They bust through the front door. There's feet on the ground. And I wake up at the Atlantic General Hospital for the fourth time that year as the result of my alcoholism. I'm hooked up to all kinds of tubes and a paper gown. And as I'm laying in there and I open my eyes and I realize that I can't even kill myself the right way, which is, you're a loser when you can't even pull that off, right? And can't even die right. And in that state of mind, and things are beeping, and I'm like half conscious, and I look at the end of the bed, and you all know who's standing there, right? Janine with the duckies. And you're laughing, I wasn't laughing, man. I didn't know if there was a place called Alcoholic Hell or not, but if there was, I was pretty sure I was in it. And Janine didn't talk to me that day. Janine had tried to talk to me a lot, but she didn't that day. She talked to the duckies, and she just said to them, girls, I brought you here to take a good look. This is what happens to an alcoholic that refuses to take our steps. Let's go, girls. And I didn't know that was going to be it, but that was going to be it. And I had this thought that came across my head. I've never had one like it before or since. And that thought was that if I get out of here, if I live through this, I'm going to find one of those old guys with that blue book and that smile on their face, and I'm going to do everything they tell me to do. Because that's the only thing I'd never done in Alcoholics Anonymous. See, I'm a meeting maker. I'll go to morning meeting, noon meeting, night meeting, and drink. I'll set up your chairs, I'll mop your floors, I'll do the literature, I'll come to conferences, I'll go to dances, you name it, I'll do it. I had done everything Alcoholics Anonymous has to offer except for Alcoholics Anonymous, right? My favorite definition, we make up definitions in AA, right? Let's face it, we just make stuff up and say it like it's a fact, right? We're like, insanity, doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result, right? I'm like, my favorite one I've heard here is belonging to a 12-step fellowship and not taking the 12 steps, right? Like, what are you doing, right? Oh, I think I'll join Oprah's book club and not read the book. Like, why, right? Like, save your money, go home, right? And what I now know is that Alcoholics Anonymous is the 12 steps. Nothing more, nothing less. That's it. That is AA, is the 12 steps. The meetings, the conferences, the dances, the fish fries, they're all to push us, guide us, and encourage us into those 12 steps. And that's it, man. Nothing more. And this guy, Jim, starts taking me through that and through these steps. And Jim got old and handed me off to this guy, Roger, especially when I got up to, steps four, I guess for new people, I want to say real fast that step one, he just pointed out, he said it in a way that I've never heard. He said, would you agree? I know you think you're really smart and you had, remember stuff. Power less. Would you agree that that means you got less power? Power less, less power. I'm like, yeah, Jim, no problem. I'm with you. And he's like, okay, the second part of the step. Can you think of any decision in your life that you've made time and time and time again? I go, yes, Jim, that I'm never going to take another drink. And he said, how are you doing managing your decision? And the answer is not very good. And that's what you're looking at tonight, is I'm a guy that's got less power than is required to manage my own most sincere desire to never take another drink. And the good news for each and every one of you is that's what the next 11 steps are about, is getting me some power. Isn't mine. It's going to come through me and enable me to not drink a day at a time for the rest of my life if I incorporate this into a way of life, right? And that's the good news of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm not one, my book does not tell me anywhere. Grab me up after if you want. You're not going to hear me walking around AA with my head down, sounding like Eeyore, going, I'm powerless over people, places, and things, right? That is, my book tells me I've been given the power to be uniquely helpful where no one else can. And that's what each of you ladies in a purple shirt is sitting here for, is to familiarize yourself with this thing, to get the miracle in your lives where you and only you can hand it to some other woman walking through that door that needs you, and you're the perfect person for them, man. And that's what we got going on. And I can't think of a better, if at the end of the day, that's the sum total of your life, right? I got to help one woman not die. It's a pretty good gig coming from where we come from. Anyways, he hands me off to Roger. After 4 and 5, it was very clear to me who the problem is. I got lists of all these people. There's only one person that's got something to do with all of it, and you're looking at him, right? There's my sum total of 4 and 5, right? And he told me steps 8 and 9, he says, this is where we get to rub the record clean. Maybe, just maybe, you get to die with an even slate. This is where the rubber meets the road. He challenged me. He said, we got all kinds of sobriety in AA. Look around. We got everything in here, from ground beef to filet mignon. What do you want? What do you want? It's like you can find somebody in AA to tell you anything you want to hear. What do you want? And I don't know why, when he told me those words of, this is it, kid. How free do you want to be? What do you want? That did something inside of me. And he said, if I was you, I'd start dating your mother. And I'm totally, any place that he said, get a little job, right? Just a job. And, I was going to McDonald's and Home Depot and trying to sweep floors and mop, and nobody would hire me. Anybody that does a background check, I'm done. And a sober member of AA hired me to sweep the floor in a picture frame shop. He made hand-carved wooden picture frames. And I would just sweep the floor for $6.25 an hour, and he would play those AA tapes, and they were tapes then, and CDs now. But that's why I love John, because John's my friend, and I've seen him and talked, spent quality time for 10 years. But I also love John for the legacy that he carries on, because I don't think I'd be sober with those tapes. And you know what I would do is I would sweep, listen, sweep, listen. And that message of AA would slowly penetrate. I think you guys marinated me, right, with that stuff. And you got me, like, from the inside out. And when you're sweeping and you start to smile, because some old guy that's dead who ended up being one of my best friends named Cliff Roach is telling a story about being a surfer in Oceanside, California, 3,000 miles away from where I'm sweeping the floor in a picture frame shop in Ocean City, Maryland, and telling a story about resentments like I've had my whole life. Do you know where Oceanside is now? I would love when he would say that, and passing out on the beach and getting sunburn on the roof of his mouth, right, with his mouth. And I'd never even met Cliff, and I loved Cliff through tables like that, right? And let me tell you, once you're laughing, we got you. Like, it's over, it's over. Something special happens with laughter. And he says, date your mom. Wherever that lady will go, take your mom on a date. If you could get her to go anywhere once a week. And I start dating my mom, and somehow I got a little bit of money to send to the IRS each week. I did a self-surrender to the IRS in Baltimore. It was a 3-hour drive. I owed them, it was like $20-some thousand, which might as well have been $1 million to me. And I turned myself, I'm like, dude, they're going to lock me up. He's like, they don't want to lock up the goose that lays the golden egg. They just want their money. And it turns out the IRS rarely locks. They just want their money. And they put me on the stupidest payment plan. I was supposed to pay $50 a week. I have no idea how you pay $20-some thousand, $50 a week. I had a payment plan in my mind, what I was going to do with the IRS. When I had like the $24,000 extra, I was going to send it to them. And it turned out I never had an extra $24,000 I felt like sending the IRS. But when the letters and the phone calls, I mean, I know some of you are, there's somebody in here that's still got it going. And the IRS does not stop with those letters, man. They pepper your mailbox. I mean, they define the word relentless, right? And the phone call, and you want to know when all that stopped? You think it stopped when I put in that $24,000? That first $50 check. I got free the first $50 check. The calls stopped. I was in the solution. The payment plan had started. I will tell you, it took me about 5 years. We went to the post office in the middle of Oceans. It's in the middle of town. There's a lot of people in there. I had the last check to the IRS after steady sending them, man, for 5 years. And I told my sponsor, he's got the pacemaker. He's about this big. You get a little smaller when you get older. And he looked like Jordan, man. He said, put it in there and say it. Say it out loud. And I'm like, my amends to the IRS is complete. And he jumps up over the mailbox. We do this big high five, and people are looking at me. And it was like the most amazing thing. And the next year, I got this thing from the IRS, and I opened it up, and it was a pretty sizable check. And I'm crying. I drive to his house because I know I'm in trouble. And I'm like, we did something wrong. I'm in trouble again. And I showed it to him, and he's like, this is a tax refund check, you idiot. Normal people get these, every. And I've been getting them for like 11 years now. And after a whole lot of dating my mom, I remember we were at Carrabba's one night, and it was funny because you guys reminded me of pasta the other night where we went, and you were teaching my man how to eat that spaghetti. And I never knew why my mom did it, but she takes a big spoon and twirls the pasta in a spoon and then eats it. But she was twirling that pasta, and her head came up. And she was looking at me eyeball to eyeball, and just started talking to me, a mother to a son. She started inviting me over to that house to take out the trash and to stand on a chair and to change a light bulb into that house where I wasn't welcome for a long time. And after a decade of your mom not looking at you in the eye, it's a pretty special moment. And the last thing I want to say, maybe two things. I will tell you that now, part of that, my mom loves being a grandmother as much as you do. I've enjoyed watching you be a grandmom. But she's got her own room at my house. We chose to build a house 1.5 miles from my mom. And I put a room for her and a guest room. And she's in and out with the kids probably 2-3 times a day. Or just I think she's getting her revenge. I mean, she comes over with like ice cream while I'm trying to get them to eat broccoli, right? And I'm like, Mom, did you not have kids? I mean, I'm trying to get right. And she's just having a ball. And but what I want to say to the tough guys, all I wanted out there on the streets, man, I wanted respect, and I wanted you to know that I was a man. And it turns out that I had it backwards. It's real hard to be a man if you don't first learn how to be a son. And I learned that through the amend of my mother. And my little sister, I had a set of Baltimore Ravens season tickets when I got sober. I have no idea why I had them. It's like newcomers at the homeless shelter that I go pick up now. They get in the car, they don't have a house. I mean, they got nothing, dude. No job, no nothing, right? But they got an iPhone 11. I'm like, what are you doing with that? Right? It's like our priorities are so screwed up, right? When we get sober, like everything's out of whack. And the book talks about that too, right? Our alcoholic life seems the only normal one. You're like, what? It's an iPhone 11. Why wouldn't you have a $1,500 phone when you don't have a house? You should, of course you do. And he said, send those tickets to your sister. You don't even like the NFL now that you're sober. The only thing you liked about going to the games was having a big tailgate in the parking lot, cooking a big, side of beef, having the best bar, being a big shot in the parking lot. By the time the game started, you were so drunk, you never knew who won. You know, that was the truth of me in the NFL. And I sent the tickets and nothing happened. He said, send the next set. And I sent it and the phone rang. And on the other end of that phone was a little girl's voice I hadn't heard in 6.5 years going, Richie, did you see that? The Ravens just caught the ball in the end zone. They're tied up. The Ravens are tied. I didn't know who the Ravens were even playing, man. There's nothing I cared about less. But I was talking to my little sister boy for the first time in 6.5 years. And I kept sending those tickets. And we developed this little relationship around football. She bought her first home in a little town called Canton. It was about 3 hours. After I'd work all week sweeping the floor for $6.25, take my mom on a date, always had $1 for your basket. Did you guys notice a little becomes a lot in AA? Anybody pick up on that? See, when we focus on the spiritual, the material always takes care of itself. When I do it the other way around, it never works out, right? There was always enough when I put you guys and this stuff first. And I go driving there. I don't have time. I don't have money to be driving there. And I'm doing it, and I'm helping her fix up her house and paint the walls. And we became the best of friends, my little sister and I became an important guy in her life, and I reassumed the role of what a big brother's supposed to be. We talked a little bit about principles, and it turns out I have something inside that I just know how a big brother's supposed to be, and I wasn't it. And now I was in Alcoholics Anonymous. And some time went by, and I got a phone call from a guy that said, hey, Rich, this is Justin. I know your father's no longer a part of your life, but you've become the number one man in your little sister's life. I'm calling to ask you if I could have her hand in marriage. And I promise you that there is nobody less qualified to give away the hand of a beautiful little girl than the drunk that stands before you. And she called me the next day and said, would you walk me down the aisle? And I've gotten to do that sober and in my right mind, and what a day. She has 2 sons now, 6 and 5, Sadler and Brixton, my nephews. My mother has a throne. Her throne is a Tommy Bahama beach chair. She sits it up in the sand right in front of my house because we live right on the beach. And she carries that little beach chair and she sets it up, and my sister drives from Annapolis and brings her boys. They're at my house right now celebrating my daughter's birthday. But in the summertime, my mom sits in that Tommy Bahama beach chair and watches all 4 of her grandkids play at her feet. And her 2 kids sit there cordially and talk and get along. And there's some spiritual literature that says, may you see your children's children, and it's the greatest gift we could give. And what I've seen with Chuck, and I've seen in my life, is in the foreword to the 2nd edition of our book, it says that Alcoholics Anonymous is growing by leaps and bounds, primarily for 2 reasons: the large number of recoveries and families reunited. And that's what I've watched, and that's what's happened in my life. I want to tell you quickly that I still had an old warrant in San Diego. I had about 2 years sober. My sponsor said that warrant was I got a DUI with some outside issues in my pocket. I went in front of the judge. He gave me a 5-year sentence and suspended all of it, provided I did this thing called the PC 1000 First Time Felony Offenders Program. It was like a old-time version of drug courts, if you guys have any drug courts here, similar. And I had to go to like 10 AA meetings and like do some clean urines. I mean, can you believe that? 5 years in prison or 10 AA meetings? What an order. I can't go through with it. And I screw it up. And I've told you what I do when I screw it up is I run away. And he said, this is a good time for you to go serve that 5 years. He's like, you're good. You've made all your amends. You're even with most people, your sister, your family. This is the time to go do that 5 years. And it's good to have a sponsor because they see things very different. I did not think it was a good time to go do 5 years in prison. They just see things different. And they put me on that plane, a bunch of my sponsees, and I go out there. And what I didn't know was about 47 of you wrote that judge a letter telling him I was coming and what my life looked like. And I went into the courtroom and scared to death. The judge said, let me get this straight. You just flew 3,000 miles on your own nickel to serve 5 years in prison. And I said, I did, sir. I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't ever want to have to take another drink or another drug. And I told you I'd do something that I didn't do it. Let's get this over with so that I could be a free, sober man. And he starts going through those letters. And he said he'd never seen anything like it. I still have it in the front of my big book. He hit that hammer down, man, and he said, you've exceeded the terms of your probation. I told you to do 10 meetings. They say you've been to over 1,000 meetings. You've done all this stuff I didn't even order you to do. You didn't do it the way that I told you to do it, but this probation is complete. I'd go back to Maryland and do whatever those people in AA tell you to do, and he hit that hammer down, and I stepped out in the hallway, and I called my sponsor, and I said, I'm coming home, Raj. I'm coming home. Tell the guys from the Big Book study we don't have to move the meeting because it was in my living room. And, and he said, wait a second, you can't come home until tomorrow. You had a one-way ticket. You got to buy a plane ticket. Why don't you go over to that college that kicked you out and see that dean while you're there? That's what I'm thinking. Like, can we celebrate for a minute here, right? But it seemed like small potatoes. I went over there. Of course, it was the same dean. Her name's Carrie Wilson. She's one of my angels. She's given me permission to talk about her. I've talked about her all over the world because my life would be totally different without that woman and without the Jesuits and what they stand for. And I got to sit across from her. I said, I don't know if you remember me. My name's Rich Bruckner. I used to go to college here. I got kicked out. She said, we remember you, Rich. We've only had one student go to federal prison in the history of the university. And I told her that I know what I did was bring a great deal of shame to the university and the Jesuits, and I know what you stand for is building men and women of integrity and education and doing the right thing, and I didn't stand for any of that, and I have absolutely no idea how to make this right, but I'll do whatever you tell me. That's how we end every amend. If I sponsor you, you're going to say that at the end of every amend. Here's what I think I did, blah, 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 blah. I don't know how to make this right. You tell me. Right? It gives the person, it's spiritual empowerment, right? It's as humble as I can be. I am at their feet. I am at their mercy. I am naked before you. Whatever you will have me do. She said, if that's true, come with me. She walked me to a building I'd never been in, slapped down a huge stack of papers and said, this is an application to our law school. What you're going to do is fill this out. You're going to go here. You're going to graduate. You're going to go on to make us proud. We don't like to kick out students. We like to graduate students. That's what makes us look good. We like students that go on to do good things. That's what makes us look good. I stepped outside. I called Roger. I said, she's lost her mind. I barely made it through college. Even if I get through law school, I'm never going to pass the bar. Even if I pass the bar, the ethics committee's never going to let me through it. The ethics committee won't let me practice. He said, shut up. Shut up. Did you just tell that lady you'd do whatever she said to make it right? And I said, yes, sir. He said, fill out the papers. 3 years later, I graduated second from the top of my class in that school. Not because I'm smart. I just did what you all taught me. I showed up 15 minutes early for every class. I shook every teacher's hand every day until they learned my name. I stayed after class like you taught me to do with the newcomer, and I asked a question, whether I had one or not. I learned how to do that from talking to newcomers, right? We're not getting in your business. We're just trying to get to know you and just build a relationship. That's it. And it turns out that's an amazing formula for school, right? And you come through with like straight A's. And the next thing you know, my phone rings, right? And on the other end of the phone is a guy that says he's the state's attorney for the state of Maryland. I know what they are. They're the ones that locked me up, right? And he says, hold on. I'm going to patch through the governor's office. We've just been given a large federal grant. I've been given your name and your phone number that you know something about the importation of narcotics into our country. I would like you to serve as my assistant state's attorney for the state of Maryland and head up the gang and narcotics unit. And my knees about buckled, right? I'm like, you got to be kidding me. But you know, the next thing I thought was what the old guy said to me. Old guys with that book. They said, one day, kid, one day your sordid past will become your greatest asset. And I served, I repeat, I served the state of Maryland for a decade, the next 10 years of my life as the senior state's attorney for the state of Maryland. I've gotten to do some amazing things, testifying in front of the Senate and the House. I got to start the drug court programs for the state of Maryland. I got to help author the Good Samaritan law that if somebody is overdosing and you call them in so they don't die, you cannot be prosecuted or locked up. I've gotten to do things far beyond what any drunk should get to do, right? And it turns out I'm not allowed to work at Walmart now. I'm not allowed to mop or clean toilets, right? But it turns out that I can write legislation and testify before the Senate and House and run an entire state's legal department. And so you just don't know, right, what God's got in store for you. And it was tricky at first because, you know, judges they're tricky. They would say things like, would the defendant please rise? And I'd stand up, right? And the judge would laugh. And it took me a while to get used to not being the defendant. And after that 10 years, stick with it. I got 1 minute here, and then we're done. After that 10 years, I got my pension, retired. My sponsor told me, you owe the state of Maryland, because I had some other dreams and goals and stuff. And by now, I had 2 kids and a wife, and I didn't die of the liver thing. And I mean, like, my God was getting bigger, right? My God was getting bigger. And we got the courage. I put in my letter of resignation the right way that you all taught me to, and we started our own law firm. And as I've done that for the last 3 years, and it turns out that after 3 years, I have the largest and I believe most wonderful DUI defense firm in the state of Maryland. And here's why it's a wonderful defense. It's the first spiritual law firm that I've ever seen. We charge, I I defend about 300 DUIs a year. Guess who gets DUIs? So about 300 times a year, I get to sit across my desk from one of you and have a conversation. You think the cop was picking on you? I mean, was this an accident? And if they say I got bad luck or an accident, I say, okay, I'll just defend you, right? But about 1 out of 5 starts to clue in, right? Hey, I noticed this is your 4th DUI. Do you think this might be a pattern or a problem? And they go, yeah, I don't know how to stop drinking. And we do this killer thing where we charge the retainer fee, and if you get 1 year sober with that chip and bring it in, you get half of it back. And what happens... What happens with that is, I live Ocean City's an island. It's 7 miles long by 1 mile. There is no way you could go to AA and get a year sober and me not see you in a meeting, right? So I'm going to know if you're there, right? And but what this has done, what God has done, is he has removed all of what Chamberlain calls conscious separation from my life. There is no such thing. I don't have a work life, a married life, an AA life, none of that. I get to have a very simple life of service where I feel somewhat useful in all areas of my life, wherever I go. And the last thing I want to thank you all for is the precious gift of your time. I know it's the one thing that we give each other that we never, ever get back, and you all chose to spend it with me tonight. Thank you.